Carson. Excited to be here with you today. Today's episode, I want to go into more about what I talked about in yesterday's episode. I really talked about, hey, can you buy the note on this ugly or vacant property that I drive by all the time? And I had several people that reached out to from the video and the audio, asked me, hey, if I could spend a little bit more time going more in depth in what I did to find the borrowers and how I kind of engaged in conversations. Because I've had conversations with 2 out of the 3. And actually, I've had conversations with all 3 of the parties. 2 are in process. 1, I'm working behind the note. 1's in the early process. And the 3rd one finally came back and said, oh, we're not ready to sell. I'm like, why aren't you ready to sell? The property's in bad condition and there's $9,000 in back taxes. So let me share with my process of going through this with you guys and gals so you can do the same thing if that's something you're looking to get more information on. Because a lot of people they see it and they don't know where to go. They think it's a complicated process. And honestly, most of the information you need is literally at your fingertips, just a few keystrokes away from giving you an idea or giving you some answers or pointing you in the right direction, okay? So obviously, first, you need to know the full address. You get the house number, the street address. Obviously, you know hopefully what city it's in. One thing that might throw a bit of a wrench into your due diligence is you got to know which county that city or the property actually sits in. Like, in some counties or some cities, they lie on 2 different counties. Like where I live here in Austin, Texas, most people think Austin is Travis County. Well, I actually live on the north side here, which is Williamson County. Some counties, like down in Aransas Pass, where my mom lives, there's actually 3 counties that Aransas Pass falls into: San Patricio, Nueces, and Aransas County. So depending on where that property is located, it's important to know, because if you search at the county records, you may not find anything at first. So don't get frustrated. So like I said, know the street number and obviously the address, city, state, and then know which county or potential 2 or 3 counties it might be in. And we like using Netra Online, NETRonline.com. We'll go and search first for the property address because I don't have the homeowner's name. Now, sometimes you'll find the homeowner's name, maybe might list on that side, like the houses or the Stevens, stuff like that. You may see a notice posted that gives the person the borrower's name, stuff like that. They may also give you a entity who owns the property now, if it's gone to a tax sale or if it's considered abandoned, things like that. So if you see stuff like that, take a picture with your phone, so that you have that information for when you go back to your computer. So what did I do? I came back, I jumped on Netra Online, I pulled up the different counties around this house. It was 3 different counties on these 3 houses in different areas. So I found the county that all 3 were in. Typed in the address, it popped up the borrower's name on the appraisal district. So I immediately, as I'm scrolling down the appraisal districts for this house, now this is going to be this will work in every county, because every county in the country lets you search by property address, okay? So I'm looking to see the borrower's name, and I'm looking to see if it gives me any sales histories, like if the ownership of the property has changed hands in the last year or 2 years. And what will that reflect? Well, if you see going in the last 2 years or less, and maybe it goes from a owner who's owned it to an LLC or a bank. If it's a bank name or a lender's name, maybe they've taken the property back in a deed in lieu. Maybe they foreclosed. If it goes to an LLC, it might be a tax sale. These are all important things to look at. But if it still lists the borrower's name as what you think it is, that's a great thing. So grab the information. I usually will print screen, save the screen real fast in my due diligence file for the asset. It gives me a name, and then what I do next is I look at the mailing address on the appraisal district, because they'll tell you the property address. And sometimes if that property is deeded over, or they have heirs, or they have family members taking over the property, like if you elderly people, a lot of times they may say FBO, may list one name of the owner of the property for the benefit of, and another name, maybe the original property or the borrower on the property. So make a note of both those things. And then look at the address. What's the mailing address? If the mailing address is the same as the property address, you're going to run into a bit of a dead end. I'll tell you what to do later on. But if it gives you another mailing address or a different address for the mailing stuff to come to, notice this, that's a good thing. Then what do? I immediately will jump on Google, and I will just literally type in the borrower's first name, last name, and city, state, and see what pops up as a general search. And a lot of times, you may find a phone number. You may find some of these skip tracing websites like White Pages or Spokio.com. Those are 2 websites I would also go to. Type in the homeowner's name, and their new mailing address. I also type in the homeowner's name and the existing address, the property address, to see what pops up. Many times you'll get different phone numbers that pop up. Sometimes you'll find relatives that are nearby, and that's a good thing. Well, if I look at white pages will usually give me roughly an estimated age range. If they're 40 to 50s, 50s to 60s, 60s plus, 70 plus. And that's important because the older the borrower get, the more likelihood that maybe they've passed away, especially if the house has been sitting vacant or in a decrepit position or condition. It's deteriorating. So if I can't find a phone number, or if it gives me a phone number, preferably a cell phone number works better than off of a landline, but if those numbers are old and outdated, then what do? I look for that homeowner or the co-borrowers, the co-owners' names, but I type in obituary, and I will put like the city it's in. So like maybe it's James House, Aransas Pass obituary, okay? And lo and behold, guess what popped up? An obituary for the guy. He passed away in 2019. But what am I looking for is I'm looking for them to list off the surviving heirs, spouse, it's husband or wife, or children. Because oftentimes they'll list the immediate children and their spouses. Like maybe it listed one of them as Vicky, last name, and then husband Smith in parentheses. So I knew it was a husband, but it was the daughter I came across, and listed all the children and what city they lived in. So one of them popped up in the same city. So I went and Google searched that name. I found her on LinkedIn. I found her on Facebook. I looked at those profiles on social media. I sent her a message on LinkedIn, which I didn't think I had very good results because she hadn't posted a lot to LinkedIn, but I found out who she worked for, providing that she still worked for the same company, which was a major hospital in South Texas. And I found her profile on, like I said, Facebook, and I sent her a private message. I said, hey, hi, Vicki, my name is Scott Carson. I believe you're the daughter of such and such person in Aransas Pass who still has a house on such and such address. I would like to talk to you to see if you guys are planning on maybe selling that property. And then I told her my mom was down the street. I'm interested in buying it as is. Would love to talk to somebody. Well, this lady Vicky at 5 o'clock messaged me back. Says, "Oh yes, that was my father. But I'm estranged. I'm not the person handling their estate. My mother's still alive, but she's in a nursing home. You would want to speak to my brother, Jerry." And I'm like, "Oh, great. Do you have his contact number?" She's like, "No, I'm estranged from him, but here is his Facebook profile." In his Facebook, I was like, "Oh, that'll work. He lives down in Mexico now." I'm like, "Okay, great." So what did I do? I went over to Facebook and I sent him a private message this morning. Hadn't heard anything back from him yet, but that can take a little bit of time. I'll search for a phone number for him later on. Now, what I also did, that was on one property, so that's kind of going down the route. Another one gave a property owner for the benefit of this lady, and for benefit of the lady was the co-owner of the house. Her husband passed away, and this lady's in a nursing home. Well, it gave me a mailing address. Well, like I said, I searched for that mailing address, and up popped the phone number for this lady, Polly, who was listed as the owner. I'm like, "Oh, that's great." So I found her number. I made a phone call. I assumed it was a cell phone. I sent a text message. Sure enough, back yesterday, I got a text message back from her. And it's the same message. "Hey, I came across, I think you may be the owner of this property. It's just down the street from my mom. I'm interested in buying the property as is. It needs some work." And this lady comes back and says, "Well, we're not interested in selling it at this time." I'm like, "Nobody's living in it, and it's just getting worse. What are you waiting for?" I also will jump on the tax appraisal districts or the tax assessor's office to find out how much back taxes owed. And I responded back and said, "Listen, there's $9,000 in back taxes for at least the last 3 or 4 years. I don't want you to lose it at a tax sale. How can I help? You sure there's not a way that I can come in?" I'm like I said, "I'm willing to buy it as is and create a win-win here if there's a possibility." No response back yet, but that's okay. I got her cell phone number. I can always leave her a phone call. I'm not going to sit here and bash her. If she said no already, I'll give her a week and I'll just follow up with her on a text message. I also found her Facebook profile, sent her a message on Facebook just to touch base. Sometimes Facebook is nice or LinkedIn is nice because they can click on your profile and see what you're doing and who you are versus just a blind text message. They may not know exactly who it is, but I always say, "Hey, I'm Scott Carson." If this is in an area that I'm from, I'm like, "Hey, I grew up in Ingleside, or I grew up in there." Like I said, my mom was down the street. And that came in really handy in sharing who I was with the third property, which I found out the lady's name. She lived nearby. She was the only owner of the property. I couldn't find a phone number I thought worked. I found what I thought was a cell phone number, so I sent a text message, no immediate response back. So what I do is when they give you a mailing address for a property, a physical address, I will Google map it. And luckily I did. I Google mapped it and up popped this property address, and inside it said like boat repairs. It was a bigger lot in a business, and there was a phone number on the sign. Well, now the picture was a couple of years old. I'm like, is the phone number going to even work? But a business, they're probably not going to change their phone number too much, right? So sure enough, I called the phone number. A guy answered the phone. I said, "Hi, my name's Scott Carson. I'm looking for such and such person who's supposedly is the owner of this property on such and such street." He's like, "Yep, that's my wife." I'm like, "Oh, great." Well, he goes, "Well, that house was previously owned by my wife and her first husband. He passed away back in 2018. She moved in with me 2019, fell behind because of COVID. He literally, I didn't just say a word. He literally just gave me the whole story. He says, yeah, we fell behind. Then COVID kicked in, and the lender is USAA. They've started the foreclosure process, but they won't give us a payoff. They changed the locks. We go back and change the locks. It needs some work. Part of the house needs to be torn down because it's his back addition." I was just sitting there listening to the guy. I was like, "Oh, wow. Okay, great." I said, "Is this your," and I'd sent a text message to cell phone. I said, "I don't mean to rude, but I came across this number. Is this your wife's number?" He's like, "Yes, it is." I said, "Well, I sent her a text message. She may not respond back. I may not respond back to a strange text message, but can you have her give me a phone call? My number, this is in the same thing. My mom lives down the street. I'm interested in potentially buying the property and seeing where it is." Well, sure enough, like less than 5 minutes later, the lady responded to my text message. And she's like, "Oh, my husband told me you called. Yes, I am that person." And so we're going back and forth via text message back and forth. And she's like, "Yeah, I owe like 170 on it. That's from last year. Here's my loan number. I had a realtor that's trying to help me out, but USA wouldn't work with me." And she sends me a screenshot of her last mortgage statement, which is over like a year and a half old. And I'm like, "Well, okay, I understand." Now, one thing you got to know is there's a property about the same square footage right across the street or diagonal to it that's listed on the MLS for 385. It's basically an estate sale. Both borrowers passed away in the last month. Two elderly people went. The house is in pristine condition. My mom actually has been inside of it. There's over like 30 photos online. So I have a pretty good comp of what that property would be like at the top of the market, right? Well, this house is not nearly that, okay? And the lady I was talking to, the owner, she's like, "Yeah, it needs a full rehab. It is outdated. The back part of the house needs to be torn down or redone completely." And I had seen this. I'd walked around the house on Sunday. I'm like, "Okay, great." And she was there. Supposed to be a property management company. And I'm like, "Yeah, I saw that." Got their phone number, called them. They wouldn't give me any information, which is very normal for a property management company, but I at least have it because I'm going to use this as fodder when I talk to the bank, or in this case, USAA. All right. So I see that she only owes like a year of back taxes. I guess I said, "Well," I was asked her to be texted, "Are the taxes all paid up?" She's like, "I think so. We haven't paid them, but I think the bank has." I was like, do you have any reason why they haven't foreclosed on you yet so far?" She's like, "No, we don't know. Just want to get out from underneath of this." I'm like, She wants to get out of it. I said, "Do you have the money to rehab it?" She's like, "No, not to bring it current or to rehab it. We don't have that at that point." It's like, "I understand. Well, let me see what I can do for you." Because I'm thinking, okay, she'd probably sign the property over if I were able to buy the note, deed it over to me, and I can let her walk on 170, 190 or whatever the debt is. If USA won't play ball with me, I can at least tell her, like, "Listen, let's get you out from underneath of this." And how am I going to tell her to get out from underneath this? I'm going to literally tell her, if USA won't play ball with me, I'm like, "Just go deed the property back. You don't have to wait on USAA to do this. We can create a deed in lieu. You sign it, notarize it, and then scan a copy of it and go file it at the county and deed the property back to avoid a foreclosure. It's a friendly foreclosure. It saves USA money, and now USA owns the property." But USA hasn't done that. It's in Texas. It's the fastest foreclosure state in the country. I don't know why they haven't. I haven't done this, but anyway, just giving you some mindset. So like I said, I've got this lady's number. She's been very responsive. What did I do? I immediately went online to LinkedIn, and I started searching for USAA, pulled the company up, and I look at job titles, and I find about 10 people, names in their their LinkedIn profiles. And I can basically call USA and try to track somebody down there tomorrow via their automated teller line. But I got their names, and I went and either I sent a connection request or I sent them an in-mail and said, "Hey, I'm interested in, and part of the title that I put in the link that's going to say interested in buying the note on whatever the loan number is and the address and the borrower's name. So, hey, I'm interested in buying the note on this property. It's in rough shape. I believe the payoff is roughly around this amount. The borrower is this name. It's been in default for over 4 years with you guys. I'd love to talk about buying the note because the property needs a lot of work. And so I sent, like I said, I sent about 10, no, I actually did send 10 messages to USAA special asset managers or secondary marketing people. I'll give them a day and then I'll follow up and just see if I can't get somebody on the phone tomorrow to respond back to my request and get the ball rolling. Now, what will I do in the meantime? I immediately reached out to my realtor friend in the area, sent her the address, told her, hey, just give me some quick comps on what a 1,400 square foot house is going to be worth. So I have some numbers. If I need to get photos of the property to prove my point, I'll go back to the borrower. I don't think she's opposed to me going in and changing the locks. Again, she's had to do it, but sending the locksmith and changing the locks, and then getting interior photos to help my case when negotiating on this note. Now, if the house is worth it in pristine condition, that's a different story. It might make sense to see how far behind is, what's the rearages, could I take it over subject to? Probably, that's probably not the case. It's more probably a note purchase, take it over, and then get a deed in lieu from the borrower in that case, because they're not going to be able to make up the rearages or make up the repairs, obviously, and just say, hey, let me just forgive you this debt you can walk and not owe anything on it, and your credit will be back to normal. Because that was one thing that popped up. They're still reporting this late to their credit. So it's immediately hurting this lady's credit, and she's between a rock and a hard place, between not being able to get paid, and then, of course, USA is just dragging this thing out. So that's a process. Now, one of the things I did, like I said, I jumped on White Pages. I typed in the person's name. Whitepages.com is free, but it gives you more information. Actually register for an account with White Pages. So White Pages actually gave me information on family around the area. Found out that this lady graduated from Aransas Pass High School in '98. When I was talking to her husband's like, oh yeah, she went to Ingleside and I guess I went to high school with her. She might have been a freshman when I was a senior, because I graduated in '95 and she was in Ingleside at the time and went to high school there as a freshman before transferring to the high school. So it was kind of funny back and forth a little bit. The other lady I talked to on the house, she's like, oh, when did you go to Ingleside? And I said, oh, we graduated way before you. I was like, yeah. But I also was able to say, like, hey, my dad owned the local hardware store, and that rang a bell. I saw some mutual friends with other people on their Facebook profiles with people that are local, which this is great. This works if you're from an area and you're working in other properties in an area. But that's the thing, is just trying to get the ball rolling. I have my realtor pool and comps in all three of these properties to get a bit of an idea of what they true after repair value. I don't like to usually target a lot of property, but this is an area that I'm very comfortable with, that properties are going up and they haven't dipped. Like I had a good conversation with my realtor. She's like, hey, yeah, Scott, it's slowed down from maybe a month to 90 days. But stuff is still moving. There's still people moving in the area because it's the coast, and there's plenty of distressed property in this neck of the woods. Just a lot of older people, smaller homes. I asked her about if there are a lot of rehabs or people are moving in. She's going to send me a rental update on it, so I have an idea of kind of rent rates. I gave her specific areas, hey, near the high school, near the elementary, other places that I could take a look at. And so it was a really great conversation. I happened to graduate with this realtor in high school, so we caught up a little bit. So she's glad to pull that information for me at no cost, because if I end up needing an agent on it, she's going to be the one that I use, and it's going to be a win-win for it. So that's kind of the thing. Like I said, find the name. If I didn't have contact with all three of these, then the next step would have gone to the recorder's office and typing in the borrower's name and the address to find out the deed, any deeds on file or any mortgages on file. I know that one's a reverse mortgage on the one where the husband's deceased, but the wife is in a nursing home. No, there's a reverse mortgage on it. And they've been letting their cousin kind of stay there for a couple of years, but the cousin is in Alaska and not living in the house. That's why I reached out, because the house was vacant and you tell nobody been in the driveway for at least a year. So and that's what you can do. I mean, you can send a letter. I'd like to be a little bit more direct with a phone call, an email, text message, social media, because I want to speed these things up while it's hot in my mind and get the ball rolling. And then I can just follow up with them as need be. And like I said, I'll keep them in the loop. If I'm negotiating something or look at something, I'll negotiate with them. Some of these people, especially if people have an older house, people have a lot of sentimental value, emotional equity, right? They may want to hold on to some things. Or I'll wait Like, look, the house is worth this. Okay. If it was fully updated, here's what it's worth. You owe this much right now. It's not worth that. Look, let me buy this from you at what you owe, or let me take this over, or let me give you a little something for your time. But if you don't play ball with me, you're going to end up losing it tax sale, or just going to depreciate worse in value. And that's not a win-win situation. I guarantee there's not insurance on these 3 properties. They're not going to be able to claim an insurance. Some of these have probably been vacant since Harvey rolled through Aransas Pass. I know one of them probably has, because the roof looked like it. But I'm going to be very conservative on the numbers of the properties that need work, because obviously it's gotten more expensive for roofing materials. I think my mom paid $170 just for one bundle of shingles to cover a pump house. It's ridiculous. So I have to be very, very conservative in my numbers. Now, what's my long-term plan on these? Maybe I do buy them, and since they're all in a geographic area, it would make sense to have as a rental. The lady I know there, she does property management. I want it to be a very active landlord. I could have somebody that's very passive. Maybe I flip a couple. Maybe I keep one. Maybe we move into one keep it as an Airbnb, and we just hang out there when we go down to see my mom. There's a whole variety of things. But as the world turns, and as time goes on, I'll get more information and share what it is. But that's the thing, guys. Check the property address, find the borrowers, do a quick skip trace. Didn't cost me anything except a little bit of time. And Google white pages, Spokio.com, social media, looking for obituaries from the borrowers if you think they've passed. That will often give it. In the past, I've reached out to obituary too, and I couldn't find any information on the heirs, and so I reached out to the funeral home, and they wouldn't release any information. I said, okay, well, can you at least pass my information on to them? And if they don't reach out to me, I won't bother them. And I did that in the past, trying to negotiate a deed in lieu on a property. Oh well, we still end up going to foreclosure on it. The heirs didn't reach out, but that's okay. But this way, I'm in contact with owners, family members of all 3 of these properties. I've got, like I said, another about 6 to a dozen that we're looking at that'll be working through. But this is the thing: if you see some stuff, it's worth taking the time. If I don't find any information, I could always send a letter. Hopefully, it gets forwarded. That's the thing to look too. If they got mail accumulating, there's not really a forwarding address, and that way, if there's a lot of mail messing, there, or newspapers or notices. Sometimes look at the notices. I'm not saying open the mailbox and violate any federal laws or anything like that, but look at what's posted. Look what you see. Talk to the next door neighbors. I had one of the neighbors wave at me and tell me like, oh, he passed away and she's in a nursing home. I said, well, would you have any contact information? And they were like, no. I was like, okay, well, my mom's down the street. That's the important thing. You don't get shot at. And I've been shot at twice. I'm not going to leave properties, but hopefully I can turn one of these into a note sale. Maybe I take one over subject to. Maybe I can, if anything, I can help these families out of a bad situation, because these properties are not getting any better to look at the longer they stay there. And that's the goal, guys, right? Is to turn lemons into lemonade and turn problem properties into profitable solutions. So if you need some help, guys, feel free to reach out to me. talkwithscottcarson.com. You'd be surprised how many times people call me on some deals like this. If you don't know if you're doing a research on an asset and you think it's a note sale, at least do the research at the county records yourself and let me know who the lender is. Let me know if you know the borrower's name, if you know this information, that's great. The more information you can get before you call me or reach out to me, the faster I can help you out, or I can tell you yes or no. If it's Bank of America, Chase, Citi, Wells Fargo, I'm sorry, you're not gonna be able to buy a note from any of those big wigs. They're just way too big and too cumbersome to find the right contact. But smaller banks, regional banks, you have a lot better luck, and we'll go from there. And especially if it's a bank I have a relationship, or I've had a relationship in the past, it's worth reaching out to. But anyway, that's a little bit of the 411 on researching ugly vacant properties. And I hope it was helpful. Like I said, the websites we use, Netra Online to get to the county records, the tax assessors, the county recorders, Spokio.com, whitepages.com, and then of course using Google to find an obituary or to find any family members, and of course jumping on social media to find if they have any LinkedIn, Facebook profiles. The folks that are 35 or greater will usually have a Facebook or LinkedIn profile. If it's a younger group, they're probably not going to have that, because Facebook's not as popular with the youth and it's harder to find and stuff. But at least you can often sometimes, like I said, look for family members on whitepages.com. They may list the neighbors and or give you, potential family members or people that live with them or have lived with in the past, or possible other addresses to search for. So hopefully that helps you guys. You can always pay one of those websites to run a quick report. I find it valuable. I can often find enough information for contact information and other stuff without having to pay the $4.99 or the $9.99 that a lot of those like white pages or Spokio pop-ups will show. All right. So hopefully that helps you guys. Go out, take some action, and we'll see you all at the top.